Hello there, and welcome to Umber Dreams Archives. I'm so glad you found your way here tonight. Before we begin, take a moment to get comfortable, to let the day fall away. Where in the world are you watching from? A quiet bedroom where the sounds of evening have finally faded? A peaceful corner where you can let your mind wander to places few have ever been? Tonight we're going to explore the Mariana Trench, the deepest place on our planet. We'll descend nearly 7 miles beneath the ocean's surface, discover what lives in absolute darkness under crushing pressure, and contemplate what it means that Earth still holds such profound mysteries. It's a journey to a world more alien than many places in space, yet it exists right here, covering our own blue sphere. But don't worry. This isn't going to be a tale of danger or terror. Instead, we'll move slowly and carefully through the discoveries, the science, and the quiet wonder of Earth's final frontier. We'll meet the creatures that call this darkness home, understand the forces that created this immense canyon, and consider what the trench teaches us about life's resilience. By the end, I think you'll find a strange comfort in knowing such deep, peaceful places exist. If you enjoy these calm explorations, a like and subscribe really helps reach others seeking the same peaceful way to end their day. And to those already subscribed, thank you for being here, for trusting these journeys into wonder. So settle in, let your shoulders drop, take a slow breath, and feel your body grow heavy. And let's begin our slow descent into the Mariana Trench. There's nowhere you need to be right now, nothing you need to do. Just listen and let the story unfold like water finding its way to the deepest point. The Mariana Trench lies in the western Pacific Ocean, east of the Philippines and south of Japan. It stretches for more than 1,500 miles, a crescent-shaped scar in the ocean floor. At its deepest point, a place called Challenger Deep, the trench reaches down nearly 7 miles, almost 36,000 feet below the surface. To put that in perspective, if you place Mount Everest at the bottom of Challenger Deep, its peak would still be covered by more than a mile of water. This is not just the deepest part of the ocean. It is the deepest place on Earth's surface, the farthest point from the sky that you can travel while remaining on our planet. The distance is so great that it takes a weight more than 8 hours to fall from the surface to the bottom. Sound travels slowly through water, and in the trench's depths, that journey becomes a meditation on scale, on the patient work of time and pressure. The trench was formed by a process called subduction, where one tectonic plate slides beneath another. The Pacific plate carrying the ocean floor meets the smaller Mariana plate and slowly, inexorably dives beneath it. This movement happens at roughly the same rate your fingernails grow, perhaps 2 or 3 inches per year. But over millions of years, this patient grinding creates profound change. The descending plate pulls the ocean floor down with it, creating a deep, narrow canyon. What's remarkable is that this process continues today. The trench is not a fossil of ancient geology, but a living feature, still deepening, still changing. The Pacific plate continues its slow dive, and with each passing century, Challenger Deep grows infinitesimally deeper. We think of Earth's features as permanent, but even the deepest point on our planet is a work in progress, shaped by forces that never rest. Standing on a beach, looking out at the ocean, it's nearly impossible to imagine such depth. The water stretches to the horizon, but beneath that familiar surface lies a vertical world of layers and zones, each with its own character. The sunlit shallows give way to twilight zones, then to complete darkness. Temperature drops, pressure builds, and far below all of that, 7 miles down, lies a place that seems to belong to another world entirely. Yet, it's part of ours. Hidden beneath the same ocean where children play in the surf, this contrast, this proximity of the familiar and the utterly alien, is perhaps what makes the Mariana Trench so quietly fascinating. And it's where our journey begins, at the surface, preparing to descend into the unknown. At sea level, the atmosphere above us exerts a pressure of about 14.7 pounds per square inch. We don't feel it because we've evolved in this environment, our bodies perfectly calibrated to this weight of air. But water is far denser than air, and as you descend into the ocean, pressure increases dramatically. For every 33 feet you descend, the pressure increases by 1 atmosphere, another 14.7 pounds per square inch. In the Mariana Trench, at Challenger Deep, the pressure reaches more than 1,000 times atmospheric pressure at sea level. That's approximately 15,000 pounds per square inch, or 8 tons pressing down on every square inch of surface. To visualize this, imagine having 50 jumbo jets stacked on top of your thumb. The force is incomprehensible to our land-adapted minds. This pressure would instantly crush most objects we're familiar with. A styrofoam cup lowered to the trench bottom returns the size of a thimble, compressed by the weight of water. Wood is crushed until its cells collapse. Air spaces implode catastrophically. Even steel, if not specially designed, will buckle and fail under such force. The pressure is so intense that water itself behaves differently, its density increasing measurably compared to surface water. For any life to exist at these depths requires extraordinary adaptations. Bodies cannot contain air spaces, which would compress fatally. Bones must be flexible or minimal. Cell membranes must be reinforced with special molecules that remain stable under pressure. It's the environment that seems fundamentally hostile to biology, yet life has found ways to thrive there, as we'll discover. The pressure also affects how we explore these depths. Submarines must be built like spheres or cylinders of incredibly thick titanium or steel, shapes that distribute pressure evenly. Even then, the metal groans and creaks as it descends, compressed by forces that would destroy conventional vessels in seconds. Windows must be tiny, made of materials that can withstand the squeeze. Every seal, every joint, every component must be engineered to perfection. Because a single flaw at such depth means instant catastrophic failure. Interestingly, the pressure creates a kind of barrier, a wall between our world and the deep. It makes the trench far harder to explore than the surface of the Moon or Mars. We've sent robots to other planets, but reaching the bottom of our own ocean requires technology just as sophisticated, just as carefully designed. The journey to Challenger Deep is, in many ways, as difficult and dangerous as a journey into space, though it happens right here on Earth. This pressure, this crushing weight of water, shapes everything about the trench, from the creatures that live there to the methods we use to study it. It's the defining characteristic of the abyss, the force that makes this place so utterly different from anywhere else on our planet. And understanding pressure is essential as we continue our descent. Sunlight penetrates the ocean in layers, each depth filtering out different wavelengths of light. In clear tropical waters, red light disappears first, absorbed within the upper 30 feet or so. Orange follows, then yellow. By 200 feet deep, even in the clearest ocean, the world has become a blue twilight. Green light persists a bit deeper, and blue light, the shortest wavelength of visible light, penetrates farthest, reaching perhaps 600 or 800 feet in ideal conditions. Below 1,000 feet, we enter what oceanographers call the midnight zone, where no sunlight ever penetrates, no matter how bright the day above. This is the realm of perpetual darkness, and it extends from 1,000 feet down to the ocean floor. Covering the vast majority of the ocean's volume, the Mariana Trench lies entirely within this zone of permanent night, beginning at depths where light has long since ceased to exist. At the bottom of Challenger Deep, 7 miles down, the darkness is absolute. It's not like a moonless night on land where your eyes eventually adjust and you can make out vague shapes. It's not like a cave where a distant opening might show a glimmer. It's total absence of light. A blackness so complete that concepts like shadow and silhouette have no meaning. If you were somehow transported there with human eyes, you would see nothing, not even your hand in front of your face, no matter how long you waited. This darkness has existed for millions of years, unbroken except for the occasional glow of bioluminescent creatures. The trench bottom has never known a sunrise, never felt the warmth of solar rays, never experienced the cycle of day and night that governs so much of life on Earth's surface. It's a place beyond the reach of the sun, operating on entirely different principles. Without light, photosynthesis is impossible. Plants cannot grow here, and the food chains that support most of Earth's ecosystems cannot exist in their familiar forms. Everything that lives in the trench must either produce its own light through bioluminescence, or rely on food that falls from the sunlit zones far above. The darkness shapes evolution in profound ways, creating creatures with enormous eyes adapted to detect the faintest glow, or creatures with no eyes at all, navigating by touch and chemical sense alone. The darkness also creates a kind of peace. Without the sun's energy driving weather patterns, creating waves, powering currents through temperature differences, the deep ocean is remarkably still. The water moves slowly, in currents measured in fractions of an inch per second. The temperature barely changes, hovering just above freezing year-round. Time passes differently here, at a pace determined not by the sun's rising and setting, but by the slow drift of organic matter from the world above. By the patient work of bacteria breaking down whatever falls to this eternal night. For humans exploring the trench, this darkness is both a challenge and a strange gift. It means we must bring our own light, our submersibles equipped with powerful lamps to pierce the black. But it also means that when we arrive, we're seeing something untouched by human presence, a world that has existed in isolation since long before our species evolved. The darkness preserves the trench's secrets, keeps them hidden until we make the difficult journey to witness them firsthand. And in that darkness, we found wonders that challenge everything we thought we knew about where and how life can exist. The surface of the ocean varies wildly in temperature, from tropical waters above 80 degrees Fahrenheit to polar seas that hover just above freezing. Seasonal changes bring warmth in summer, cold in winter. Currents carry heat from the equator toward the poles, and cold water back toward the tropics. The upper ocean is a dynamic, changing environment where temperature fluctuates constantly. But as you descend, temperature becomes increasingly stable. Below about 3,000 feet, the ocean maintains a nearly constant temperature regardless of season, latitude, or surface conditions. The sun's heat cannot penetrate to these depths, and the water temperature reflects only the cold of the polar regions where deep water forms and sinks, spreading slowly throughout the ocean basins. In the Mariana Trench, the temperature hovers between 34 and 39 degrees Fahrenheit, just a few degrees above the freezing point of seawater. This temperature never changes significantly. While surface waters above the trench might vary by 20 or 30 degrees between winter and summer, the bottom of Challenger Deep remains locked in an eternal near-freezing state. This stability is remarkable, an environment where temperature has been essentially constant not just for years or decades, but for millions of years. Cold water has interesting properties that matter at these depths. It's denser than warm water, which is partly why it sinks and accumulates in the deep ocean basins. It holds more dissolved oxygen than warm water, which is crucial for any life at these depths that still relies on respiration. And cold water slows metabolisms, allowing creatures to survive on minimal food in an environment where nutrition is scarce. The cold also interacts with pressure in fascinating ways. Under the immense pressure at the trench bottom, water's properties change. Its freezing point is actually lowered slightly by the pressure, and its viscosity increases, making it move more sluggishly. The water at Challenger Deep is not quite the same substance as water at the surface, its molecular structure subtly altered by the extraordinary conditions. For the creatures living in the trench, this cold is simply the norm. They've never known warmth, never experienced the sun-heated shallows where tropical fish swim, their enzymes, their cellular processes, Their entire biochemistry is adapted to function in near-freezing water under crushing pressure. What would kill a surface fish through temperature shock alone is simply home for them. The cold also preserves things that fall to the trench bottom. Organic matter decomposes slowly in cold water, and under pressure, bacterial activity is reduced. A whale carcass that falls to the trench floor might persist for decades, providing food for specialized communities of scavengers and bacteria. The cold turns the trench into a kind of archive, where evidence of surface life accumulates slowly over millennia. There's something peaceful about this temperature stability, this cold that never varies, never surprises. While the surface world experiences storms and seasons, heat waves and cold snaps, the trench remains unchanged, a reference point of constancy. It's a reminder that Earth contains not just variety but also permanence, places where conditions have remained essentially the same since long before human civilization began. And it's this combination of extreme pressure, absolute darkness, and near-freezing temperature that makes the Mariana Trench one of the most challenging environments on Earth, a place where only the most adapted, the most specialized forms of life can survive. The Mariana Trench marks a boundary not just of depth, but of worlds. Above the trench, the ocean teems with familiar life, the ecosystems we associate with the sea, coral reefs, schools of fish, dolphins and whales, kelp forests and coastal shallows. It's a realm connected to the sun, driven by light and warmth, part of the biosphere we recognize and understand. Below, in the trench, lies something fundamentally different, an environment so extreme that it operates on different principles, supports different kinds of life, exists in conditions that seem more alien than earthly. The trench is a reminder that our planet contains within itself multiple worlds, stacked vertically in the ocean's depths, each as distinct from the others as separate planets might be. The boundary between these worlds is not sharp but gradual, a transition zone spanning thousands of feet. As you descend, light fades slowly. Pressure builds incrementally. Temperature drops degree by degree. Species adapted to shallower depths give way to those suited for greater depths. It's a gradient, a gentle transition that nonetheless leads to a place utterly unlike where it began. Geologically, the trench also marks a boundary. It's where the Pacific Plate meets the Mariana Plate, where the ocean floor returns to the mantle from which it originally came. In a sense, it's where the surface of Earth ends and its interior begins, the point of recycling that keeps our planet's geology active and dynamic. The rocks at the bottom of the trench are among the youngest on the ocean floor, having only recently been created at mid-ocean ridges before beginning their slow journey to subduction. This geological boundary creates unique chemical environments. Where the descending plate bends and fractures, seawater can penetrate deep into the rock, becoming heated and chemically altered. It may eventually return to the surface through hydrothermal vents, carrying dissolved minerals and gases. These vents, if they exist in the trench, would create oases of chemical energy in an otherwise food-poor environment, places where specialized bacteria could harvest energy from chemistry rather than from sunlight filtering down from above. The trench also marks a boundary in human knowledge. We know more about the surface of Mars than we do about the deepest parts of our own ocean. Only a handful of people have ever descended to Challenger Deep, fewer than have walked on the moon. The vast majority of the trench remains unexplored, unmapped, unknown. It represents the largest unexplored territory on Earth, a frontier that lies not in some distant region, but directly beneath our feet, under miles of water. There's something profound about the existence of such places, these boundaries that separate the familiar from the strange. The trench reminds us that Earth is not a uniform sphere but a planet of extremes, of gradients from equator to pole, from mountain peak to ocean floor. And the deepest extreme, the farthest point from the atmosphere and sunlight, is the Mariana Trench. As we continue our exploration, we'll cross these boundaries, moving from the known to the mysterious, from the well-studied to the barely glimpsed. We'll discover what lies in the deepest dark, what survives under impossible pressure, what Earth has hidden in its deepest fold, and perhaps we'll find that the boundary between worlds is not as absolute as it seems, that life and wonder exist even in the most extreme environments our planet can create, connecting the trench to the surface in ways we're only beginning to understand. On January 23rd, 1960, two men prepared to make a journey no human had ever attempted. Jacques Piccard, a Swiss engineer and explorer, and Don Walsh, a lieutenant in the United States Navy, climbed into a deep-diving submersible called Trieste. Their destination was Challenger Deep, the deepest point in the Mariana Trench, 7 miles straight down into darkness and crushing pressure. Trieste was an unusual vessel, more like a balloon than a submarine. It consisted of a large float filled with gasoline, which is lighter than water and incompressible under pressure, and a small spherical pressure hull where the two men would ride. The sphere was made of forged steel, 5 inches thick, with a single small window of acrylic plastic. It was barely large enough for 2 people to squeeze inside, and once the hatch was sealed, they would be committed to the descent. The dive began in the early morning. As Trieste sank beneath the surface, Piccard and Walsh watched the water change colour outside their tiny window, from blue to deep blue to violet, then to black. The descent was slow, controlled by releasing iron pellets that served as ballast. Too fast a descent would risk overshooting the bottom or losing control. The men had to trust their instruments, their engineering, and each other. As they passed through 3,000 feet, 4,000, 5,000, the pressure on the hull increased steadily. The steel sphere compressed slightly, shrinking by fractions of an inch under the load. Inside, the temperature dropped as the cold of the deep ocean penetrated through the thick metal. Piccard and Walsh sat in near silence, conserving oxygen, monitoring gauges, descending slowly into an abyss no human eye had ever witnessed. At 20,000 feet, they heard a sharp crack, a noise that rang through the hull like a gunshot. One of Trieste's acrylic windows had fractured under the pressure. The men conferred quietly. They could abort, drop their ballast and rise to safety. But the window that had cracked was on the external hull, not their pressure sphere. They were still safe. They decided to continue. The descent took nearly 5 hours, an eternity of waiting in cramped darkness. The only sounds, the creak of metal, the hum of life support, the occasional voice over the radio growing more distant as they sank. Finally, at 35,800 feet, Trieste settled gently onto the bottom of Challenger Deep. They had reached the deepest point on Earth. Through their window, they switched on external lights and looked out at a world no one had ever seen. The bottom was a plain of pale sediment, soft and fine, and moving across that sediment to their astonishment was a flatfish, a creature resembling a flounder swimming slowly. They saw shrimp, small animals moving in the beam of their lights. Life existed here, even in this most extreme environment. The discovery was profound, challenging the assumption that such depths would be too hostile for complex life. Piccard and Walsh remained on the bottom for 20 minutes, documenting what they saw, taking photographs, marvelling at the achievement. Then they dropped their ballast weights and began the long ascent back to the surface, rising slowly through the darkness, through the midnight zone, through the twilight, back into sunlight and the waiting world. They had proven that humans could reach the deepest ocean, that technology could withstand the ultimate pressure Earth could exert, and that life's tenacity extended even to the most remote corners of our planet. Their journey opened a door, showed that the trench was not unreachable, not unknowable, but a place we could visit, study, and begin to understand. After Piccard and Walsh's historic dive in 1960, something remarkable happened. Nothing. For more than 50 years, no human would return to Challenger Deep. The trench having been reached once, was left alone, unexplored, a place visited and then abandoned. This gap seems strange in retrospect. In the same period, humans landed on the Moon 6 times, established a permanent presence in Earth orbit, sent probes to every planet in the solar system, and revolutionized our understanding of the cosmos. Yet the deepest point on our own planet remained unvisited, a place more remote to us than the lunar surface. The reasons for this gap were partly practical. Deep ocean submersibles are extraordinarily expensive to build and operate. The technology required to withstand trench pressures is at the absolute limit of engineering, requiring materials and construction techniques that push the boundaries of what's possible. Trieste itself was essentially a one-off design, not easily replicated or improved upon. After its Challenger deep dive, the vessel was retired, and no immediate successor was developed. There was also a question of purpose. The single dive had demonstrated that the trench could be reached, and that life existed there. What more could be learned by returning? Scientific funding often flows toward areas where new discoveries seem likely, and for decades, the deep ocean was considered explored enough, its basic nature understood. The excitement and funding went elsewhere, to space exploration, to genetics, to computing. But this absence of human presence didn't mean the trench was ignored entirely. Scientists developed robotic systems that could descend to great depths without risking human life. These remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, could be lowered on cables and controlled from ships at the surface. They weren't as deep diving as Trieste, but they could explore the upper reaches of the trench, collecting samples, taking photographs, mapping the seafloor. Autonomous underwater vehicles, or AUVs, were also developed, robots that could navigate independently without a cable tether. These machines could spend hours or days in the deep ocean, following pre-programmed paths, gathering data, and returning to the surface when their batteries ran low. They expanded our knowledge of the trench's geography and geology without requiring the immense resources needed for crewed dives. The gap in human exploration also allowed time for technology to advance. Material science progressed, creating stronger, lighter alloys and composites. Electronics became more sophisticated, enabling better control systems and sensors. Computing power increased exponentially, making it possible to simulate and test submersible designs before building them. By the time interest in crewed deep ocean exploration revived, the tools available were far superior to what Piccard and Walsh had used in 1960. There's a lesson in this gap, perhaps. The most difficult places to explore are not necessarily the most scientifically rewarding. The trench is extraordinarily hard to reach, but once there, what you find is a dark, cold, high-pressure environment with limited biodiversity. A single dive might tell you most of what can be learned from direct observation. The real understanding comes from samples, from long-term monitoring, from detailed mapping, all of which robots can do more efficiently than crewed submersibles. Yet the gap also represents a lost opportunity. 50 years is a long time in the history of science. Imagine what we might have learned if we'd maintained a consistent presence in the deep ocean during that period, if we'd treated the trench with the same sustained attention we gave to space exploration. The creatures discovered in a single 20-minute visit hint at what might exist throughout the trench's vast length. Species we've still never documented, adaptations we've still never studied. The silence of those decades is a reminder that exploration requires commitment, that understanding distant places, whether in space or the deep ocean, demands sustained effort over long periods. And it makes the eventual return to Challenger Deep all the more significant. A reconnection with Earth's deepest mystery after half a century away. On March 26, 2012, film director and explorer James Cameron sat alone in a cramped vertical capsule, descending rapidly toward the bottom of Challenger Deep. His submersible, Deep Sea Challenger, was a radically different design from Trieste, a vertical torpedo shape built for speed and maneuverability in the deep ocean. Cameron He is known for films about the sea and for pushing technological boundaries, had spent years planning this moment. The descent took just over 2 hours, faster than Trieste's 5-hour journey. Deep-sea Challenger's streamlined shape allowed it to fall more quickly through the water column, its ballast carefully calibrated to reach the bottom efficiently. Cameron sat in a sphere less than 4 feet in diameter, his knees drawn up, surrounded by instruments and controls. He was the first human to make a solo dive to the deepest ocean, completely alone 7 miles beneath the surface. As he fell through the darkness, Cameron deployed cameras and lights, documenting the descent. He passed through the zones of the ocean, through the twilight where the last traces of sunlight fade, into the midnight zone where bioluminescent creatures flash and glow, down into regions where even those biological lights become rare. The water outside his viewport was perfectly clear but utterly black, the lights of his submersible piercing only a few meters into the void. At 35,756 feet. Deep-sea Challenger touched the bottom of Challenger Deep, settling into the soft sediment. Cameron switched on his lights and looked out at a landscape he described as lunar, a pale, almost featureless plain stretching away into darkness. He saw no large animals, no fish like those Pickard and Walsh had reported. Instead, he found what looked like a desert, a quiet expanse of fine sediment disturbed only by his arrival. Cameron spent nearly 3 hours on the bottom, far longer than the brief visit of 1960. He deployed a robotic arm to collect samples, gathering sediment and whatever small creatures it might contain. He took high-resolution photographs and video, documenting the environment in detail impossible in the earlier dive. He tested equipment, pushed deep-sea Challenger systems, proved that modern technology could not just reach the trench but work there, conduct science there. The lack of visible large life was initially disappointing but scientifically important. It suggested that Challenger Deep might not be uniform in its biology, that different parts of the trench might support different communities. The flatfish seen in 1960 might have been a rare visitor, or the trench's life might be patchily distributed, concentrated in certain areas and absent from others. Understanding this distribution would require many more dives, many more samples. Cameron also experienced the profound isolation of the deep. In space, astronauts can see Earth below them, a reminder of home. In the trench, there is only darkness, pressure, and the knowledge that the nearest other human is 7 miles straight up. The psychological challenge of such isolation is real, a test of nerve and focus that adds another dimension to the difficulty of deep ocean exploration. When Cameron released his ballast and began to ascend, Deep-sea Challenger rose quickly through the water column, its flotation modules pulling it upward. The ascent took just over an hour. A rapid climb back to the world of light and air. When the hatch opened and Cameron emerged, he had completed only the second crewed descent to Challenger Deep in history, and the first in over 50 years. His dive was significant not just as an achievement but as a proof of concept. It showed that deep ocean exploration could be made faster, more efficient, more capable of doing science. Deep-sea Challenger's cameras and samples would contribute to our understanding of the trench for years to come. And Cameron's journey helped revive public and scientific interest in the deepest ocean, reminding us that Earth still holds places barely explored, mysteries waiting in the dark. While crewed submersibles capture public imagination, the real workhorses of deep ocean exploration are robots. These machines, tethered or autonomous, have explored far more of the Mariana Trench than humans ever have, descending repeatedly to collect data, map the seafloor, and sample the strange life found there. Remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, are the most common tool for deep exploration. These machines are connected to a surface ship by a long cable that carries power down and control signals up. An operator on the ship, watching video feeds from the ROV's cameras, pilots the robot through the water using joysticks and computer controls. It's like playing a video game where the graphics are real and the stakes are a multi-million-dollar machine working under crushing pressure miles below. ROVs have explored large sections of the Mariana Trench, mapping its walls and floor with sonar, collecting rock samples with robotic arms, capturing high-definition video of the creatures that live there. They can work for hours at a time, limited only by the ship's ability to maintain position above them and the durability of their systems. Some ROVs have been rated for full ocean depth, capable of reaching even Challenger deep, though such extreme-rated systems are rare and expensive. The advantage of ROVs is their ability to perform delicate work. With manipulator arms controlled from the surface, they can collect specific specimens, deploy instruments, repair equipment, or retrieve samples placed on previous dives. They bring human dexterity and decision-making to the deep ocean without the risk and expense of sending actual humans. If an ROV fails, it's a financial loss but not a tragedy. This makes them ideal for the routine work of exploration. Autonomous underwater vehicles, AUVs, take a different approach. These robots carry their own power and navigation systems and operate independently once deployed. They're programmed with a mission, such as mapping a specific area of the trench or following a particular depth contour, and then released to carry it out. They navigate using internal maps, sonar, and sometimes even by tracking their position relative to the seafloor below. The UVs can go places too deep or too dangerous for tethered systems. They can explore under ice, inside underwater caves, or in areas where a tether might become snagged. In the Mariana Trench, AUVs have been used to create detailed bathymetric maps, using sonar to measure the exact depth and shape of the seafloor. These maps reveal features invisible from the surface, underwater mountains and valleys, landslides and faults, the complex topography of the trench. Both types of robot face significant challenges at trench depths. The pressure can crush electronics, flood battery compartments, break seals and connections. Every component must be specially designed and tested. Cameras need pressure housings with thick windows. Motors must work against water compressed to higher density. Batteries must maintain their chemistry under load that would deform normal designs. Communication is also difficult. Radio waves don't penetrate water, so the usual methods of wireless control don't work. ROVs rely on their physical cables, but even copper and fibre optics can be affected by the pressure and distance. Acoustic communication, using sound waves through the water, is possible but slow and unreliable. An AUV working in the trench is largely on its own, unable to receive real-time commands, dependent on its programming and sensors to complete its mission successfully. Despite these challenges, robotic explorers have dramatically expanded our knowledge of the Mariana Trench. They've discovered new species, documented geological processes, measured currents and water chemistry, collected thousands of samples for analysis. They work tirelessly, without the need for food, air, or sleep, multiplying the amount of time we can spend observing the deep ocean. In many ways, robots are the ideal explorers for such extreme environments, patient, persistent, and unbothered by conditions that would kill a human in seconds. They represent the future of deep ocean science. The tools that will ultimately map and understand the trench in detail we can barely imagine today. On April 28, 2019, explorer Victor Vescovo descended to a depth of 35,843 feet in the Mariana Trench, slightly deeper than any previous crewed dive. He was piloting the submersible DSV limiting factor, a two-person vessel designed specifically for repeated dives to full ocean depth. And unlike Trieste or Deep-Sea Challenger, which made single historic dives and then retired, limiting factor was built to dive again and again, to make deep ocean exploration routine rather than exceptional. Vescovo's dive was part of the 5 Deeps expedition, an ambitious project to reach the deepest point in each of the world's 5 oceans. The Mariana Trench, as the deepest of all, was in some ways the culmination of this effort. The though Vescovo would return to Challenger Deep multiple times over the following months, bringing scientists and even the first woman to reach the deepest ocean, geologist Kathy Sullivan. Limiting Factor's design reflected decades of advancement in materials and engineering. Its pressure hull was made of titanium, lighter and stronger than the steel used in Trieste. Its shape was more compact than Deep-Sea Challenger, a sphere attached to a streamlined body. It could accommodate 2 people comfortably, unlike Cameron's cramped vertical capsule, and crucially, it was certified for unlimited dives to full ocean depth, meaning it could be used over and over without degradation. During his dives, Vescovo found what others had missed or only glimpsed. He saw plastic bags and candy wrappers on the trench floor, evidence that human pollution has reached even the most remote parts of the ocean. He collected samples that revealed new species of amphipods, small shrimp-like creatures that exist in vast numbers in the deep. He documented features of the trench's geology, confirming that it continues to be geologically active. The repeatability of Vescovo's dives changed the nature of deep ocean exploration. Trieste and Deep-Sea Challenger were single achievements, remarkable but isolated. Limiting Factor made it possible to return to Challenger Deep, to bring different observers, to collect samples from multiple locations, to compare conditions at different times. This is how science progresses, through repeated observation, through accumulation of data, through the ability to test hypotheses by going back and looking again. Vescovo also broke another barrier by bringing passengers. On June 7, 2020, astronaut Catherine Sullivan, who had walked in space 36 years earlier, became the first woman to reach Challenger Deep. Her dive symbolized the convergence of space and ocean exploration, demonstrating that the skills and perspectives developed for one extreme environment can apply to another. The technology developed for Limiting Factor has broader implications. If submersibles can be built to withstand full ocean depth and do so repeatedly, then similar designs could be used for commercial purposes, for mining, for laying cables, for scientific research stations on the deep sea floor. The trench, and by extension all deep ocean, becomes not just a place to visit briefly, but a place where humans can work, conduct long-term studies, establish a presence. Yet even with these advances, we've still explored only a tiny fraction of the Mariana Trench. The trench is 1,500 miles long and 43 miles wide in places. Challenger Deep is just one point, the deepest, but not necessarily representative of the entire system. Vast stretches of the trench have never been seen by human eyes or cameras. New dives reveal new features, new creatures, new mysteries. Each descent answers some questions and raises others. Vescovo's achievement, like those of Pickard, Walsh and Cameron before him, reminds us that exploration is not about single heroic moments, but about sustained effort. It's about building on what came before, improving the tools, returning again and again, gradually transforming the unknown into the understood. The trench is no longer impossible to reach, but it remains profoundly difficult, still at the edge of human capability, still demanding the best of our technology and determination. And as we develop the tools to visit more frequently, to stay longer, to look more carefully, we begin to truly understand what lies in Earth's deepest fold. Among the most common residents of the Mariana Trench are amphipods, small crustaceans related to the sand fleas you might find on a beach. But in the deep ocean, these humble creatures take on dimensions that seem impossible. While surface amphipods might measure a fraction of an inch, their deep-dwelling cousins can grow to the size of a human hand, some specimens reaching nearly a foot in length. These giant amphipods are scavengers, wandering the trench floor in search of food. When a dead fish or whale carcass falls from the surface, amphipods can detect the chemical signature from remarkable distances. They swarm to the food source in vast numbers, sometimes thousands gathering on a single carcass. Their combined feeding capable of stripping flesh from bone in a matter of days. The reason for their gigantism is still debated among scientists. One theory involves temperature and oxygen. Cold water holds more dissolved oxygen than warm water, and the trench's near freezing temperatures provide ample oxygen even at great depth. With abundant oxygen, creatures can support larger body sizes. Lower temperatures also slow metabolism, meaning these giants can survive on less food than equally sized creatures in warmer water. Another factor might be pressure itself. The crushing force that would kill surface organisms requires special adaptations. Cell membranes must be reinforced with particular lipids that remain flexible under pressure. Proteins must be modified to maintain their shape and function. These adaptations might naturally favour larger, more robust body structures, making gigantism a side effect of pressure adaptation. The amphipods also lack predators in the deep trench. With few fish at extreme depth, and no large predators to hunt them, amphipods can grow large without the evolutionary pressure to remain small and fast. Size becomes an advantage, allowing them to travel farther in search of food, to store more energy reserves between meals, to dominate access to the rare bonanzas of nutrition that fall from above. Observing these creatures requires patience. Researchers deploy baited cameras, lowering them to the trench floor with chunks of fish or other bait attached. The cameras record for hours, capturing the gradual arrival of amphipods as they detect the chemical trail and follow it to the source. What starts as an empty frame slowly fills with moving shapes, pale bodies crawling over each other, feeding frantically on the bait. These recordings reveal complex behaviours. Amphipods don't simply feed randomly but establish hierarchies, larger individuals dominating access to the choicest portions. They communicate through chemical signals and physical contact, coordinating their feeding and warning each other of disturbances. They exhibit something resembling strategy, with some individuals hanging back to wait for the most aggressive feeders to become sated before moving in. Collecting specimens is challenging. When amphipods are brought to the surface, the drop in pressure often kills them, their cells rupturing as water inside them expands. Studying them alive requires specialized chambers that can maintain trench pressure, systems that keep the water cold and dark, approximating their natural environment. Even then, amphipods in captivity often refuse to feed or exhibit natural behaviors, stressed by confinement and the impossibility of replicating the trench's complex conditions. Yet what we've learned from these giants is remarkable. Their biochemistry includes novel compounds that protect against pressure, molecules that might have applications in medicine or industry. Their ability to detect food over vast distances suggests sensory systems far more sensitive than our own. Their role as scavengers makes them essential to the trench's ecology, breaking down and redistributing nutrients, connecting the surface world to the deep through their feeding. The amphipods of the Mariana Trench remind us that life adapts to the most extreme conditions not by barely surviving, but by thriving, by growing large and complex, by filling ecological niches with remarkable efficiency. In the darkness and pressure, these creatures have found not just existence but success, and studying them teaches us about the fundamental flexibility of biology, the endless ways life finds to make a home on Earth. In the absolute darkness of the Mariana Trench, many creatures have evolved their own light sources. Bioluminescence, the ability to produce light through chemical reactions, is common throughout the deep ocean. Fish, squid, jellyfish, and countless smaller organisms glow with blues and greens, creating a constellation of living stars in the perpetual night. The chemistry of bioluminescence is elegant. Most bioluminescent organisms produce light using a molecule called luciferin, which reacts with oxygen in the presence of an enzyme called luciferase. This reaction releases energy as photons, as light, without generating significant heat. It's cold light, efficient light, evolved independently many times in different lineages of ocean life. Creatures use bioluminescence for various purposes. Some fish have light organs on their undersides, producing a glow that matches the faint light filtering down from above, making them invisible to predators looking up from below. This is called counter-illumination, camouflage through light. Others use bioluminescent lures, dangling glowing appendages to attract prey within reach of waiting jaws. The anglerfish, with its famous glowing lure, is the most well-known example of this strategy. Some deep-sea creatures flash brightly when threatened, startling predators or illuminating them for other predators to see. This is called a burglar alarm defense, using light not to escape directly, but to summon help or create confusion. Jellyfish are particularly adept at this, their bodies erupting in rippling waves of blue-green light when disturbed. Communication is another function. Some squid flash patterns of light to signal to others of their species, conveying information about food, danger, or reproductive readiness. In the darkness where visual signals would normally be impossible, bioluminescence creates a language of light, allowing social coordination in the abyss. But in the Mariana Trench, especially near the bottom, bioluminescence becomes rare. The extreme depth and pressure limit the diversity of life, and many trench creatures have evolved to exist without light entirely. These animals are often blind or have highly reduced eyes, vestigial organs that serve no function in an environment where sight is impossible. The snailfish found in the trench, for example, have small eyes that are likely non-functional. Instead, they navigate by touch and chemical sensing. Their bodies covered in sensitive receptors that detect water movement, temperature changes, and chemical gradients. They find food by smell and feel, by bumping into amphipods or other prey in the dark, relying on senses that don't require light. This shift from visual to non-visual sensing represents a fundamental reorganization of how an organism perceives its world. For most surface animals, vision is the primary sense, the main way of gathering information about the environment. In the trench, that entire sensory system becomes useless, and evolution redirects resources to other senses. The brain regions that would process visual information shrink or repurpose, while areas for processing chemical and tactile signals expand. There's a parallel here to how some cave-dwelling animals evolve. Cut off from light, fish in caves often lose their eyes over generations, becoming blind. The trench creatures have undergone similar changes, but over evolutionary time spans in an environment far more extreme. They represent what happens when life adapts to permanent darkness, when an entire sense is abandoned as no longer useful. Interestingly, some trench creatures may retain the ability to detect bioluminescence even if they don't produce it themselves. A creature might not need eyes to see shapes, but could still benefit from detecting the glow of bioluminescent prey or the flash of a threatened neighbour. These animals might have simple light-detecting organs, patches of photosensitive cells that can't form images but can detect the presence of light, giving them an edge in a world where any information is valuable. The diversity of solutions to life in darkness is remarkable. Some creatures glow, some detect glow, some ignore light entirely. Each strategy works in its own way, each carved by evolution to fit the specific needs and opportunities of life in the trench. And studying these adaptations helps us understand not just how life works in Earth's deepest ocean, but how it might work in other dark environments, in caves, in soil, perhaps even on other worlds where light is absent or rare. The deepest living fish ever recorded are snailfish, small gelatinous creatures that inhabit the Hadal zone, the region of the ocean deeper than 20,000 feet. Unlike the popular image of deep-sea fish as monsters with huge teeth and terrifying appearances, snailfish are rather gentle-looking, with translucent bodies, small fins, and an almost tadpole-like appearance. Snailfish have been found at depths exceeding 26,000 feet in the Mariana Trench, living under pressures that would crush most fish instantly. Their secret lies in their unusual biology. Instead of swim bladders filled with gas, which would be compressed fatally at such depth, snailfish have bodies composed largely of watery gel, tissue that's nearly incompressible. They're essentially bags of fluid with minimal internal structure, which allows them to withstand pressure that would collapse rigid organisms. Their skeletons are minimal and cartilaginous, flexible rather than hard. Bones would be a liability at such depth, rigid structures that pressure could fracture. Cartilage bends and compresses slightly, absorbing stress without breaking. This gives snailfish a fragile appearance, and indeed, when brought to the surface, they often fall apart, their gel-like bodies unable to maintain structure without the pressure they evolved in. Snailfish feed primarily on amphipods and other small invertebrates, using suction to draw prey into their mouths. They have relatively small jaws but effective digestive systems, able to extract nutrients efficiently from their limited diet. In an environment where food is scarce, efficiency matters. Every meal must be used completely, waste minimized. Reproduction in snailfish is still not fully understood. They lay relatively large eggs compared to surface fish, eggs that develop slowly in the cold water. The young likely hatch as miniature adults, ready to feed on small prey immediately. There's no larval stage that requires different food or habitat. This direct development is common in deep-sea creatures, a way to avoid the vulnerability of a larval phase in an environment with few safe places for young animals to grow. One remarkable discovery is that snailfish at different depths are often different species, each adapted to a specific depth range. A species living at 20,000 feet differs from one at 25,000 feet, even though both look superficially similar. This vertical speciation suggests that depth itself acts as a barrier, with pressure defining boundaries as real as geographical distances on land. The deeper snailfish also show adaptations at the molecular level. Their proteins are structured to function under extreme pressure, with amino acid sequences that maintain proper folding even when compressed. Their cell membranes contain special lipids that prevent them from becoming too rigid under pressure and low temperature. These are subtle changes, invisible to the naked eye, but essential for survival at the bottom of the ocean. There may be a limit to how deep fish can live. As pressure increases, certain biological molecules become unstable. Certain cellular processes fail. Current theory suggests that below about 27,000 feet, the pressure makes it impossible for standard fish biochemistry to work. This would explain why no fish have been found deeper than around 26,000 feet, despite there being deeper parts of the ocean, including Challenger Deep at 35,000 feet. The snailfish living at the edge of this depth limit are, in a sense, living at the absolute boundary of what fish biology can tolerate. They've pushed adaptation to its theoretical extreme, evolved to survive in conditions that represent the physical limit for their type of organism. Going deeper would require fundamentally different biochemistry, perhaps even a different organizational structure, something that evolution hasn't yet produced in fish. Studying these fish teaches us about the limits of life, the boundaries of what biology can achieve. It shows us how flexible life is within those boundaries, but also that boundaries exist, that there are conditions too extreme even for life's remarkable adaptability. The snailfish of the Mariana Trench live at the edge, and understanding them helps us understand what edges are, where they lie, and why they exist at all. The most abundant life in the Mariana Trench isn't fish or amphipods, but microbes, bacteria and archaea that exist in astronomical numbers in the sediment covering the trench floor. A single handful of trench mud contains billions of microscopic organisms, forming communities as complex and diverse as any ecosystem on Earth's surface. These microbes survive under conditions that seem incompatible with life. The pressure crushes them, though their small size and flexible cell walls allow them to withstand forces that would destroy larger organisms. The cold slows their metabolism to a crawl, with some cells dividing only once per century, living in a state of near-suspended animation. The darkness eliminates photosynthesis, forcing them to derive energy from chemistry alone. Many trench microbes are chemosynthetic, meaning they harvest energy from chemical reactions rather than from light. They oxidize sulfur, iron, manganese, and other elements, extracting energy from the transfer of electrons just as surface plants extract energy from sunlight. This chemistry-based life doesn't rely on the sun, making it independent of the photosynthetic world that supports most surface ecosystems. Some microbes in the trench feed on the organic matter that falls from above, the dead plankton and fish and whale carcasses that eventually settle to the bottom. They break down these complex molecules, returning nutrients to simpler forms that can be used by other organisms. This decomposition is slow in the cold water, but over time, the microbes complete it, acting as the recyclers of the deep ocean. Others live in the sediment itself, feeding on ancient organic matter buried millions of years ago. These microbes exist at depths of hundreds of feet below the seafloor, in layers of sediment compressed by the weight of water and time. They live at the absolute edge of habitability, in tiny pores between sediment grains, with barely enough space for their cells, barely enough nutrients to sustain their minimal metabolism. The diversity of microbial life in the trench is astonishing. Genetic studies of mud samples reveal thousands of distinct species, most of which have never been cultured in laboratories, their biology still unknown. Each species occupies a specific niche, processing specific chemicals, surviving in specific microenvironments within the sediment. Together, they form a network of interactions as intricate as a rainforest. Though operating at scales we can barely perceive, some trench microbes have enzymes that function under extreme pressure, proteins that would denature and fail in surface conditions but work perfectly under tons of force. These enzymes are of intense interest to biotechnology companies, as they might be used in industrial processes that require high-pressure conditions. Understanding how these proteins maintain their structure and function could lead to new manufacturing techniques. New medicines, new materials, other microbes produce novel compounds, molecules not found anywhere else, synthesized as byproducts of their unusual metabolism or as defenses against the harsh environment. Some of these compounds have antibiotic properties, killing other microbes. Some are antifungal or antiviral. Pharmaceutical researchers study trench microbes hoping to find new drugs, new chemical structures that might fight diseases or treat conditions currently beyond medicine's reach. The discovery that microbial life extends deep into the seafloor beneath the trench has profound implications. It means the biosphere, the layer of Earth that supports life, extends farther than we thought, not just across the surface but deep into the crust. Life has colonized not just the ocean above but the rock below, creating a deep biosphere that might contain more biomass than all surface life combined. These deep microbes also inform our thinking about life beyond Earth. If life can exist in sediment under miles of ocean and miles of rock, under crushing pressure and in total darkness, then similar life might exist in the subsurface oceans of moons like Europa or Enceladus. The conditions in the Mariana Trench, while extreme, might be common in the solar system, and the microbes living there might be our best model for what alien life could be like. The mud of the Mariana Trench, looked at closely, is teeming with life, with organisms surviving and even thriving under conditions that would have seemed impossible not long ago. They remind us that life finds a way, that even in the most hostile environments, biology persists, adapts, and creates ecosystems as rich and complex as any on Earth. And they suggest that the limits of life are far broader than we once imagined, that the definition of habitability needs constant expansion as we discover life in places we'd written off as lifeless. The Mariana Trench forces us to ask a fundamental question about biology. How deep can life exist? Is there a depth beyond which conditions become so extreme that even the most adapted organisms cannot survive? Or does life extend all the way to Earth's core, persisting in forms we haven't yet imagined or discovered? Current evidence suggests there are limits, boundaries beyond which life as we know it cannot function. For fish, that limit appears to be around 27,000 feet, the depth where pressure begins to disrupt the molecular machinery that fish cells require. Below that depth, we find no fish, despite extensive searching in the deepest parts of multiple ocean trenches. For microbes, the limits are less clear but still present. Pressure itself may not be the primary constraint. Microbes can withstand enormous pressure, their small size and flexible structure allowing them to survive crushing forces. But pressure combined with temperature creates challenges. At certain depths in Earth's crust, heat from the planet's interior raises temperatures above the boiling point of water. Even under pressure, most known life cannot survive prolonged exposure to temperatures above about 250 degrees Fahrenheit, a limit set by the stability of organic molecules and the structure of proteins. This temperature limit likely defines how deep life can exist in Earth's crust. Near mid-ocean ridges, where volcanic activity brings hot rock close to the seafloor, the habitable zone might extend only a few hundred feet into the sediment. In colder regions, like the Mariana Trench where the subducting plate is relatively cool, life might persist several miles into the crust, living in the pore spaces between rock grains, in fractures where water can penetrate. Energy availability also limits life's depth. Microbes need some source of energy to maintain their cells, to reproduce, to carry out the basic chemistry of living. In deep sediments, the only energy sources are chemical, the gradients between different elements and compounds. But as you go deeper, these gradients weaken. The chemicals reach equilibrium, the energy differential disappears. Below a certain depth, there simply isn't enough energy available to support even the most efficient, slowest living microbes. Some scientists propose that life exists at Earth's core mantle boundary, in the thin layer where the planet's iron core meets its rocky mantle. The conditions there are extraordinarily extreme, with pressures of millions of pounds per square inch and temperatures of thousands of degrees. Any life would have to be radically different from anything we know, perhaps using silicon instead of carbon, perhaps existing in molten rock rather than liquid water. This is highly speculative and no evidence supports it, but it illustrates how we must constantly reconsider what life is and what it requires. The Mariana Trench sits far from these theoretical limits. At even the deepest part of Challenger Deep, conditions, while extreme, are still well within the range where life not only survives but thrives. The trench is cold enough, has enough energy in the form of falling organic matter and chemical gradients, and has pressures that, while immense, are not beyond biology's capacity to handle. What the trench teaches us is that life's limits are primarily about energy, chemistry and temperature, with pressure playing a secondary role. Life can adapt to crushing force if it has the right structure. It can survive in darkness if it can find chemical energy. It can tolerate cold if its metabolism adjusts. But it cannot exist without some energy source, some chemical disequilibrium to harvest, and it cannot persist at temperatures that break down its molecular components. Understanding these limits helps us search for life elsewhere. It tells us what to look for on other worlds, what conditions must be met for biology to exist. The Mariana Trench, as an extreme but still habitable environment, gives us a reference point, an example of what life can tolerate and what it needs. And perhaps most importantly, it shows us that life's tenacity often exceeds our expectations, that when we think we've found the limit, we often discover life has pushed a little farther, adapted a little more, found yet another way to persist in conditions we thought impossible. The question of limits remains open, not fully answered. Each new dive to the trench, each new core of sediment brought up from the deep, reveals more about where life exists and how it survives. We're still learning the boundaries, still discovering what's possible, and that ongoing discovery is part of what makes the trench so fascinating, a place where our understanding of life itself is tested and expanded. The deep ocean is not silent. Though we might imagine the trench as a place of complete quiet, sound travels remarkably well through water, better than through air, and the ocean is filled with noise from natural and human sources. Understanding the soundscape of the Mariana Trench reveals another dimension of this environment, one we're only beginning to appreciate. Water conducts sound efficiently because of its density. Sound waves travel about 4 times faster in water than in air, and they travel farther before dissipating. A whale song produced in the Atlantic can be detected across entire ocean basins, travelling thousands of miles. In the deep ocean, where there are fewer obstacles and less turbulence than at the surface, sound can travel even farther, creating an acoustic environment where distant events become audible. Researchers have deployed hydrophones in the Mariana Trench, sensitive microphones designed to record underwater sound. These recordings reveal a surprisingly active acoustic environment. The hydrophones pick up the calls of whales swimming far above, their low-frequency songs propagating down through the water column. They detect the clicks of sperm whales hunting in the deep, the squeaks of dolphins at the surface, the grunts and croaks of fish. They also record earthquakes. The Mariana Trench sits in a seismically active region, where the Pacific plate subduction generates frequent tremors. The hydrophones capture the rumble of these quakes, sound waves propagating through rock and water, marking the slow collision of tectonic plates. Some earthquakes are barely perceptible, microtremors that would never be felt on land. Others are powerful, their acoustic signature clear and ominous, a reminder that the trench is a dynamic, geologically active place. Human-generated sound is also present. Ships crossing the Pacific create noise from their propellers and engines, low-frequency rumbles that can reach the trench floor. Sonar, used by naval vessels for submarine detection, sends powerful pulses of sound through the ocean, some of which penetrate to great depths. Even underwater construction, oil drilling, and seismic surveys for mineral exploration contribute to the acoustic environment. This noise has consequences for marine life. Many deep-sea creatures rely on sound for communication, navigation, and hunting. Sperm whales use echolocation to find squid in the dark, sending out clicks and listening for the echoes bouncing back from prey. If the ocean becomes too noisy, these echoes become harder to detect, like trying to have a conversation in a crowded, loud room. Whales may have to click more loudly or spend more energy to find food, a subtle stress imposed by human activity. The trench itself generates sound through geological processes. Underwater landslides, where sediment on the trench walls collapses and tumbles downward, create rumbling noises. Hydrothermal vents, if they exist in the trench, would hiss and roar as superheated water erupts from the seafloor. Even the movement of water itself, currents flowing over rough bottom, can generate sound, a kind of white noise that forms the baseline of the trench's acoustic environment. Some researchers speculate that creatures in the trench might use sound in ways we haven't observed. In the complete darkness, sound could serve as a primary sense, more important than vision or even smell. A fish might navigate by listening to the echoes of its own movements, using a form of echolocation to map its surroundings. Amphipods might communicate through clicks or rasps, coordinating feeding or mating through acoustic signals. Recording the soundscape of the deep ocean is challenging. Hydrophones must withstand the pressure, be powered for long periods, and store or transmit their data back to the surface. Some systems are autonomous, left on the trench floor for months, recording continuously before being recovered. Others are connected by cables to surface ships, transmitting data in real time. Each approach has limitations, but together they're building a library of deep ocean sounds, an acoustic portrait of the trench. What emerges from this work is a picture of the trench as a place of complex acoustic ecology, where sound carries information, where silence is rare, where the environment is shaped by vibrations travelling through water and rock. It's a reminder that our senses, evolved for life on land, give us an incomplete picture of the ocean. What seems silent to us might be rich with sound to the creatures that live there, a world of communication and information we're only beginning to hear and understand. In 2018, a research team analysing sediment samples from the Mariana Trench made a troubling discovery. The samples contained microplastics, tiny fragments of plastic debris less than 5 millimeters in size. These particles, originating from discarded bottles, bags, fishing gear, and countless other sources, had somehow reached the deepest point on Earth, carried by currents and the slow rain of particles from the surface. The presence of plastic in Challenger Deep was both surprising and inevitable. Surprising because of the distance involved. The trench is hundreds of miles from the nearest significant landmass, far from any obvious source of pollution. Inevitable because plastic is nearly indestructible on human timescales. Once created, plastic persists for centuries, breaking into smaller and smaller pieces but never truly disappearing. Given enough time, even the remotest corners of the ocean would eventually accumulate these fragments. Further analysis revealed that amphipods and other creatures living in the trench had plastic fibers in their digestive systems. They had ingested the microplastics, either by consuming them directly while feeding on sediment or by eating other creatures that had consumed plastic. The fibers appeared to pass through the amphipods without being digested, but their presence raised questions about long-term effects. Does plastic accumulation affect the creature's health? Does it reduce their ability to absorb nutrients? Does it introduce toxic chemicals into the food web? The toxic chemicals are a particular concern. Plastics are not biologically inert but contain additives, plasticizers, flame retardants, colorants, designed to give them specific properties. Many of these additives are toxic to marine life. In addition, plastic surfaces attract and concentrate other pollutants from the water, including heavy metals and persistent organic pollutants. A tiny plastic fragment can become a highly concentrated source of toxins, and when ingested, those toxins can enter an organism's tissues. The discovery of plastic in the trench also revealed something about ocean circulation. The fact that microplastics reach Challenger Deep means there are pathways by which surface material descends to the deepest ocean. These pathways might involve the sinking of dead organisms that had ingested plastic, or the aggregation of plastic with organic particles that form marine snow, the constant rain of detritus that falls slowly through the water column. Understanding these pathways is important for predicting where pollutants will accumulate and how they'll affect deep-sea ecosystems. During Victor Vescovo's dives to Challenger Deep, he reported seeing larger pieces of plastic trash on the seafloor, a plastic bag, a candy wrapper. These objects had somehow survived the long descent intact, settling gently onto the trench bottom, where they would likely persist for centuries. They were jarring sights, markers of human impact in a place that should be pristine. Evidence that no part of Earth is beyond our reach or immune to our waste. Pollution in the trench is not limited to plastic. Heavy metals from industrial processes, pesticides from agriculture, radioactive isotopes from nuclear testing and accidents, all these pollutants eventually find their way into the ocean, and over time, into the deep sea. Sediment cores from the trench contain traces of these substances, creating a historical record of human industrial activity preserved in mud. There's a sad irony here. The Mariana Trench, one of the last truly wild places on Earth, one of the least accessible and most pristine environments, has been contaminated by human activity. We didn't need to visit the trench to pollute it. Our waste reached it on its own, carried by the ocean's circulation, accumulating slowly over decades. It's a reminder that Earth systems are interconnected, that what we discard on land or near shore eventually spreads throughout the entire ocean. Addressing this pollution is extraordinarily difficult. Cleaning up the deep ocean is impractical with current technology. We can't send ships to vacuum the trench floor, can't filter microplastics from 7 miles of water. The only real solution is to stop adding plastic to the ocean in the first place, to reduce production, improve waste management, prevent the leakage of plastic into the environment. This requires global cooperation, changes in manufacturing and consumption, a fundamental rethinking of how we use and dispose of materials. The trench's pollution also serves as a warning. If our waste reaches the deepest ocean, then nowhere is safe, no ecosystem beyond our impact. The consequences of our actions spread farther and last longer than we typically consider. A plastic bottle discarded today might end up in Challenger Deep decades from now, persisting there for centuries, a monument to our throwaway culture in Earth's most remote abyss. Scattered across the ocean floor, including possibly within the Mariana Trench, are hydrothermal vents, places where seawater seeps into cracks in the seafloor, becomes superheated by contact with magma below, and erupts back into the ocean carrying dissolved minerals. These vents are oases in the deep ocean, sources of heat and chemical energy that support unique ecosystems unlike any others on Earth. Hydrothermal vents were first discovered in 1977 near the Galapagos Islands, a finding that revolutionized our understanding of where and how life can exist. Prior to this discovery, scientists believed all ecosystems ultimately depended on sunlight, with photosynthesis at the base of every food chain. The vents proved this wrong. They supported thriving communities of organisms that relied entirely on chemosynthesis, bacteria that harvest energy from hydrogen sulfide and other chemicals dissolved in the vent fluids. These chemosynthetic bacteria form the base of the vent ecosystem, filling the role that plants play on land or algae play in the surface ocean. They're consumed by specialized animals, mussels, clams, tube worms, that have formed symbiotic relationships with the bacteria, hosting them in their tissues and relying on them for nutrition. Other creatures, shrimp, crabs, fish, graze on the bacteria or prey on the creatures that harbour them, creating a complete food web independent of the sun. In the Mariana Trench, evidence suggests hydrothermal vents may exist, though they haven't been extensively documented. The subduction zone creates the geological conditions for venting: fracturing of rock as the Pacific plate bends, magma intrusion from the mantle, circulation of seawater through the heated crust. If vents are present, they would be among the deepest on Earth, operating under the extreme pressure of the trench. The chemistry of these hypothetical deep vents would be fascinating. Under extreme pressure, the fluids erupting from the seafloor might have properties different from shallower vents. Gases that would normally bubble out of solution might remain dissolved. Minerals might precipitate in different forms. The entire chemical environment could be unique, and any life adapted to it would likely show novel biochemistry. Discovering vents in the Mariana Trench would be significant scientifically. It would extend our knowledge of where vent ecosystems exist, reveal how they function under extreme pressure, and possibly introduce us to entirely new species. Some of these species might have adaptations useful for biotechnology, enzymes that work at high temperature and pressure, for example, or novel metabolic pathways that could be harnessed for industrial processes. Vents also have implications for the origin of life. Some theories propose that life began at hydrothermal vents, in the chemical-rich, energy-abundant environment they provide. If this is true, then understanding vent chemistry and vent ecosystems helps us understand the conditions under which life first emerged on Earth. And it suggests that life might originate at similar vents on other worlds, on ocean moons like Europa, for instance, where water and rock interact in ways that could create vent systems beneath ice-covered seas. Finding vents in the trench requires sophisticated exploration. Visual surveys are difficult because vents can be small and widely scattered across vast areas of sea floor. Chemical surveys, where water samples are analysed for the signatures of vent fluids, can detect vents from greater distances. Autonomous vehicles equipped with chemical sensors can patrol the trench, mapping plumes of warm, mineral-rich water that point back to their source. Even if vents are rare or absent in the Mariana Trench, the possibility of their existence adds another layer of potential diversity to the trench ecosystem. It reminds us that the trench is not a uniform environment, but a complex landscape with variations in chemistry, temperature, and biology. Each part of the trench might host different communities, different species, different solutions to the challenges of life in the deep. The search for hydrothermal vents in the Mariana Trench continues, a quest to map the full extent of these remarkable systems, to understand how they operate under extreme conditions, and to discover what lives around them. Each vent found adds to our knowledge, challenges our assumptions, and reveals more about how life adapts to Earth's most extreme environments. The Mariana Trench is not a static feature, but an active geological process, a place where Earth's plates collide and one is forced beneath the other at a rate of several inches per year. This movement generates earthquakes, some small and frequent, others rare but powerful. Understanding the seismicity of the trench helps us understand the forces reshaping Earth's surface and the risks they pose. The earthquakes occur because subduction is not smooth. The Pacific Plate doesn't slide gently beneath the Mariana Plate. Instead, the two plates lock together, held by friction along their boundary. Stress builds as the plates try to move, accumulating over years or decades. Eventually, the stress exceeds the friction, and the plates suddenly slip, releasing energy as seismic waves. This is an earthquake. Most trench earthquakes are shallow, occurring at depths of less than 30 miles where the plates first meet. These are called megathrust earthquakes when they're large, among the most powerful earthquakes on Earth. A megathrust earthquake in the Mariana Trench could reach magnitude 8 or even magnitude 9, releasing energy equivalent to thousands of nuclear weapons. Such an event would cause violent shaking across the region and could generate a tsunami that would threaten coastlines throughout the Pacific. Deeper earthquakes also occur as the descending Pacific Plate penetrates into the mantle. These deep focus earthquakes happen at depths of 300 miles or more far below the trench itself. They're caused by phase changes in the rock, where minerals reorganize under extreme pressure, suddenly shrinking in volume and releasing energy. Deep focus earthquakes are less dangerous than shallow ones because they're too deep to cause strong surface shaking, but they tell us about conditions in Earth's interior, about the journey of the subducting plate. The Mariana region experiences thousands of small earthquakes each year, most too small to be felt but detectable by seismometers. These microquakes mark the ongoing subduction, the continuous adjustment of plates as they grind past each other. Mapping these small events helps scientists understand where stress is accumulating and where the next large earthquake might occur. The trench's seismicity also affects life. Earthquakes trigger underwater landslides, where sediment on the trench walls collapses and tumbles to the bottom. These landslides bury whatever organisms live on the seafloor, creating disaster zones that take time to recolonize. They also stir up sediment, clouding the water, potentially affecting filter feeders and other creatures sensitive to water clarity. Tsunamis generated by trench earthquakes are another concern. When the seafloor suddenly uplifts or subsides during an earthquake, it displaces the entire water column above, generating waves that propagate outward at high speed. In the open ocean, these waves are barely noticeable, low and fast-moving. But when they reach shallow coastal waters, they slow down and grow in height, potentially becoming catastrophic when they strike land. Monitoring the Mariana Trench's seismic activity is part of tsunami early warning systems. Networks of seismometers detect earthquakes in real time, and if an event is large enough and shallow enough to generate a tsunami, warnings are issued to coastal communities. Buoys equipped with pressure sensors can detect the passage of a tsunami wave in the open ocean, providing confirmation that a wave has been generated and is propagating towards shore. The geological forces at work in the trench are immense and slow, operating on timescales of millions of years, but expressing themselves through sudden events like earthquakes that mark the progress of subduction. The Pacific Plate descends a few inches each year, but over millions of years this adds up to hundreds of miles. Entire ocean basins are consumed, continents drift, mountain ranges rise from the collision of plates. The trench is a window into these processes, a place where we can observe the mechanics of plate tectonics in action. For those living near the trench, the seismic risk is a constant background concern. The Mariana Islands, Guam, and other nearby land masses must prepare for earthquakes and tsunamis, building structures to withstand shaking, establishing evacuation routes, educating residents about the hazards. The trench is both a natural wonder and a source of danger, a reminder that Earth is dynamic, powerful, and capable of sudden violence. Yet there's also something reassuring about the trench's seismicity. It tells us that Earth is alive, geologically active, its interior heat driving the movement of plates that recycle crust and maintain the planet's magnetic field. Without subduction zones like the Mariana Trench, Earth might become geologically dead like Mars, its interior cooled, its surface static. The earthquakes, while dangerous, are symptoms of a healthy planet, evidence that the processes that have shaped Earth for billions of years continue today. Despite decades of study, vast portions of the Mariana Trench remain unexplored. Only a tiny fraction of its seafloor has been seen directly by humans or cameras. Most of what we know comes from indirect methods: sonar mapping, sediment sampling, analysis of creatures caught in baited traps. The trench holds mysteries we've barely begun to address, questions we don't yet know how to ask. One fundamental unknown is the full inventory of species living in the trench. Every expedition discovers new creatures, species never before described. A single deployment of a baited camera might attract amphipods or fish that don't match any known species, their genetics revealing their distinct lineages. How many species exist in the trench? Dozens? Hundreds? More? We simply don't know. The distribution of life within the trench is also poorly understood. Are creatures found at one location typical of the entire trench, or does each section have its own unique community? Does life concentrate in certain areas, perhaps near food sources like methane seeps or hydrothermal vents? Is the trench uniform or patchy in its biology? Answering these questions requires surveying far more of the trench than we've managed so far. The trench's geology is incompletely mapped. We have sonar-based bathymetric maps showing the general shape of the seafloor, but these maps lack the resolution to reveal smaller features, individual boulders, outcrops, depressions. High-resolution mapping would show us the detailed topography, help us understand sediment distribution, identify areas of geological interest. But creating such maps requires expensive surveys with specialized equipment, time aboard research vessels, resources that are limited. The chemistry of trench water is another area of uncertainty. We know the basic parameters: temperature, salinity, oxygen levels, but the concentrations of trace elements, rare compounds and biological molecules are largely unknown. Do chemical gradients exist within the trench, variations from one area to another? Are there localized inputs of nutrients or toxins? How does the chemical environment change over time? These questions matter for understanding the ecosystem, but require sampling campaigns far more extensive than any conducted to date. The microbial life in the trench sediment is virtually unstudied. We've collected samples and analysed their DNA, revealing thousands of species. But we can't culture most of these microbes in laboratories, can't observe their behaviour, can't study their metabolism directly. They remain genetic sequences, names in a database, without the context that would make them truly known. Unlocking the biology of these microbes would require new techniques, methods for studying organisms that refuse to grow in controlled conditions. The role of the trench in global ocean processes is also unclear. Does the trench act as a sink for certain elements, concentrating them in its sediments? Do currents in the trench connect to deep water circulation patterns that affect the entire Pacific? Does the subduction of sediment-laden crust carry water and carbon into Earth's mantle, influencing volcanism and the long-term carbon cycle? These are big-picture questions that require integrating trench studies with broader oceanography and geology. Human impact on the trench is documented but not quantified. We know plastic and other pollutants have reached the deep ocean, but we don't know how much is there, how it's distributed, or what its effects are on trench ecosystems. Are populations of amphipods or fish declining due to pollution? Are reproductive rates affected? Is the food web being altered? Without baseline data from before contamination, it's hard to assess what has changed. Climate change adds another layer of uncertainty. As the surface ocean warms and acidifies, does the trench environment change too? The deep ocean is more thermally stable, but over centuries, even it might warm slightly. Changes in surface biology could alter the amount of organic matter falling to the trench, affecting food availability for deep-sea creatures. Ocean acidification might change the chemistry of trench water, affecting shell-forming organisms or altering chemical gradients. Understanding these potential impacts requires long-term monitoring, data sets spanning decades. The unknowns outnumber the knowns in the Mariana Trench. Each answer we find raises new questions. Each expedition reveals how much we still have to learn. This is the nature of exploration. The more we discover, the more we realize how much remains hidden. The trench is a reminder of Earth's complexity, of the limits of our knowledge, of the work that remains to be done. And perhaps there's a beauty in this uncertainty, in knowing that Earth still holds secrets, that not everything is mapped and catalogued and explained. The trench remains, in a real sense, a frontier, a place where discovery is still possible, where the next dive or sample might reveal something utterly unexpected. This potential for surprise, for wonder, is part of what draws scientists and explorers to the deep ocean, to the margins of human knowledge where the unknown beckons. The Mariana Trench is sometimes called the most alien environment on Earth, a place with conditions so extreme and so different from the surface that studying it feels like exploring another planet. This comparison is more than metaphorical. The trench provides our best laboratory for understanding what life might be like in the deep oceans believed to exist beneath the ice of Jupiter's moon, Europa, and Saturn's moon Enceladus. Europa's ocean, if it exists as scientists believe, lies beneath miles of ice, cut off from sunlight just as thoroughly as the Mariana Trench. The ocean would be cold, dark, under high pressure from the weight of the ice above. These are the same conditions that characterize the trench. If life exists in Europa's ocean, it would likely resemble trench life more than anything found in Earth's sunlit seas. The life in Europa's ocean would have to rely on chemosynthesis, harvesting energy from chemical reactions rather than from photosynthesis. This is exactly what happens at Earth's hydrothermal vents, and potentially in the Mariana Trench if vents exist there. The bacteria that oxidize sulfur and hydrogen. The creatures that host these bacteria and live off their production, these are the models for what Europan life might look like. Studying pressure-adapted organisms from the trench teaches us what biochemistry is possible under high pressure. The proteins that function in trench microbes might resemble the proteins that would evolve in Europa's ocean. The lipids that keep cell membranes flexible despite crushing force might be the same chemistry any life would need in a deep ocean environment. The trench is our reference point, our example of how life adapts to deep ocean conditions. The trench also teaches us about the limits of life. If we understand what conditions are too extreme for life on Earth, we can better assess whether Europa's ocean is habitable. If the pressure or temperature or chemistry is beyond what even trench life can tolerate, then perhaps Europa is lifeless. If conditions fall within the range we observe in the trench, then life becomes plausible, even likely given enough time. There are differences, of course. Europa's ocean likely has a rocky seafloor where hydrothermal vents could exist. But the water chemistry might differ from Earth's ocean. The presence of salts, the pH, the concentration of organic molecules, all these could vary. The trench, with its range of chemical environments, helps us understand how variations in chemistry affect what life is possible, giving us tools to assess Europa's habitability, even though we can't yet sample its ocean directly. Exploring the Mariana Trench also develops the technology we'll need to explore Europa. The submersibles and robots that can withstand trench pressures could, with modifications, operate beneath Europa's ice. The sensors we use to study trench chemistry could be adapted to analyze Europan water. The techniques for detecting life in extreme environments, looking for chemical signatures, unusual isotope ratios, complex organic molecules can be refined in the trench and then applied to samples from other worlds. NASA and other space agencies study the trench for this reason. They send researchers to ride along on deep ocean expeditions to learn from oceanographers how to explore remote high-pressure environments. They test prototype instruments in the trench, verifying that they can survive the conditions and perform as designed. The trench becomes a proving ground for space exploration technology, a place to make mistakes and learn lessons before committing to missions costing billions of dollars. There's a certain poetry in this connection between the deepest ocean and the most distant moons. It suggests that exploration is fundamentally the same wherever it happens, that the skills and knowledge developed exploring Earth serve us when we venture beyond it. The trench is both a destination in its own right and preparation for journeys to come, a place where we learn about our planet and about the possibilities for life throughout the universe. If we ever discover life on Europa or Enceladus, it will likely bear a resemblance to the creatures of the Mariana Trench, small, hardy, adapted to darkness and pressure, thriving in an environment that seems hostile but is to them simply home. And we'll understand that alien life better because we studied the trench, because we took the time to explore our own planet's deepest places, learning lessons that prepared us for the cosmos. The Mariana Trench offers lessons that extend beyond marine biology and geology. It teaches us about our planet's nature, about our place within it, about the balance between fragility and resilience that defines Earth's systems. One lesson is about resilience. The fact that life exists in the trench, thriving under conditions that would annihilate most organisms, demonstrates how adaptable biology can be. Life doesn't just cling to existence in the deep ocean. It diversifies, evolves, creates complex ecosystems. This resilience is a source of hope in a time of environmental change. It suggests that even if we alter surface conditions dramatically, life will persist somewhere, will find a way to continue. But the trench also teaches fragility. The ecosystems there are specialized, adapted to specific conditions that have remained stable for millions of years. Change those conditions, warm the water, alter the chemistry, introduce pollutants, and these ecosystems might collapse. The species that have evolved in isolation for eons might not be able to adapt quickly to new stressors. The trench's stability has allowed extreme specialization, but that specialization comes with vulnerability. The presence of plastic in Challenger Deep is a sobering lesson about interconnection. We might think of the deep ocean as remote and isolated, untouched by human activity. But Earth's systems are linked. Ocean currents carry our waste to every corner of the globe. The atmosphere distributes pollutants worldwide. Nothing is truly isolated. Actions in one place have consequences everywhere, even in the deepest trench. This interconnection means responsibility. We affect places we've never seen, creatures we didn't know existed, ecosystems we don't understand. The trench amphipods with plastic in their guts, the sediment laced with heavy metals, these are our doing, consequences of choices made thousands of miles away and decades ago. Recognizing this responsibility is uncomfortable but necessary. We can't plead ignorance anymore. We know our reach extends even to the deepest ocean. The trench also offers perspective on human achievement. Reaching Challenger Deep is extraordinarily difficult, requiring our best technology and most skilled explorers. Yet we've done it, multiple times, proving that human ingenuity can overcome immense challenges. The same species that reaches the bottom of the ocean also reaches the moon, maps the human genome, builds computers that fit in our pockets. We're capable of remarkable things when we commit resources and creativity to a goal. But the trench reminds us that not everything is conquerable or meant to be conquered. Most of the trench remains unexplored, not because we lack the technology, but because exploring it thoroughly would require resources we choose to allocate elsewhere. The trench will likely remain mostly unknown for the foreseeable future, a place beyond our complete understanding. There's wisdom in accepting this, in recognizing that some mysteries might persist, that perfect knowledge isn't always achievable or even desirable. The trench teaches humility. Standing at sea level, Looking out at the ocean, we see a two-dimensional surface, blue waters to the horizon. But beneath that surface lies a vertical world of immense depth and complexity, a world we can barely access, populated by creatures we can barely study. We're land animals, adapted for a narrow range of conditions. The ocean, especially the deep ocean, is fundamentally alien to us. We can visit, but we can never truly belong there. This humility extends to our understanding of Earth. We think we know our planet, have mapped it, studied it, named every mountain and river. But the Mariana Trench, along with the rest of the deep ocean, covers more than half of Earth's surface and remains largely mysterious. There's more we don't know about our home planet than we do know. The trench is a reminder to stay curious, to keep exploring, to resist the assumption that the important discoveries have all been made. Finally, the trench teaches us about time. The geological processes that created it operate over millions of years. The deepest sediments are ancient, deposited before humans existed. The creatures living there have lineages stretching back through evolutionary timespans we can barely comprehend. The trench places us in context, shows us that our species is a recent arrival, that Earth's story is vastly longer than the human chapter within it. These lessons, resilience and fragility, interconnection and responsibility, achievement and humility, mystery and understanding, our place in time, are gifts the trench offers to anyone willing to contemplate it. They're not comfortable lessons, not always easy to accept, but they're truthful, and they help us think more clearly about who we are, what we're doing to our planet, and how we might live more wisely within the limits of this blue sphere we call home. The history of Mariana Trench exploration is short, barely 60 years from the first descent to the present. Yet in that time, we've progressed from a single experimental dive to multiple crewed descents and extensive robotic surveys. The future promises even more as technology improves and interest in the deep ocean grows. One likely development is the expansion of crewed submersible programs. Limiting Factor, which has completed multiple dives to full ocean depth, represents a new generation of reusable deep ocean vehicles. As more such submersibles are built, the cost per dive should decrease, making regular visits to the trench economically feasible. We might see scientific teams conducting seasonal surveys, monitoring specific sites over years, observing changes in the ecosystem. Tourism to the trench is possible, perhaps even inevitable. If submersibles become safe and reliable enough, wealthy individuals will want to experience Challenger Deep for themselves, to see the deepest ocean with their own eyes. This tourism could fund further exploration, generating revenue that supports scientific research. But it also raises questions about managing human presence in such a fragile environment, about ensuring that visitors don't damage the places they come to see. Robotic exploration will certainly expand. Autonomous vehicles are becoming more sophisticated, capable of longer missions, better at navigating complex environments. We might see semi-permanent robotic stations deployed on the trench floor, equipped with cameras and sensors, monitoring conditions continuously and transmitting data to satellites above. These stations could alert scientists to unusual events, earthquakes, landslides, the arrival of a whale fall, triggering targeted studies. Genetic and microbiological research will deepen. As DNA sequencing becomes cheaper and more portable, we'll be able to analyze samples from the trench in greater detail, uncovering the full diversity of microbial life. We might sequence the genomes of entire trench ecosystems, documenting every species, every gene, every metabolic pathway. This genetic archive could reveal new enzymes, new biochemical processes, new strategies for surviving in extreme conditions. The search for hydrothermal vents in the trench will continue. Finding these oases would be a major discovery, revealing entirely new ecosystems and possibly new forms of life. The chemistry of deep trench vents might teach us about the origin of life, or inform our search for life on other worlds. Every year without finding vents makes their eventual discovery more tantalizing. A potential breakthrough always just beyond the next survey. Climate monitoring will become more important. As we try to understand how Earth's climate is changing, the deep ocean serves as a valuable reference. Changes in temperature, chemistry, and biology in the trench can tell us about shifts in global ocean circulation, about the slow absorption of surface changes into the depths. Long-term data from the trench will help calibrate climate models, improve predictions about future conditions. Mineral exploration is controversial but possible. The seafloor contains valuable metals, manganese nodules, cobalt-rich crusts, polymetallic sulfides around hydrothermal vents. Mining these resources would require technology very similar to that used for deep ocean science. As demand for rare metals increases, pressure to exploit deep-sea resources will grow. Balancing economic interest with environmental protection will be one of the major challenges in deep ocean management. International cooperation will be essential. The Mariana Trench lies in international waters, beyond any single nation's jurisdiction. Exploring and managing it requires collaboration among countries, scientific institutions, and private entities. Treaties and agreements will need to be developed to govern access, protect the environment, share benefits from discoveries. The trench can serve as a model for how humanity manages shared resources in remote, difficult-to-reach places. Education and public engagement will play a role. The more people understand about the trench, the more they'll care about protecting it. Documentaries, live-stream dives, virtual reality experiences, all these can bring the deep ocean to audiences who will never visit in person. Creating emotional connections to the trench, showing its beauty and strangeness, helps build a constituency for conservation. The future of trench exploration is not guaranteed. It depends on continued funding, on maintaining scientific interest, on developing technology that remains ahead of the immense challenges. But the trajectory seems positive. Each decade sees more exploration, more knowledge, more capability. Slowly, the Mariana Trench is revealing its secrets, and that revelation seems likely to continue as long as we choose to invest in understanding our planet's deepest places. What we'll find as exploration continues is impossible to predict with certainty. New species, certainly. Unexpected geological features, probably. Perhaps vents. Perhaps novel forms of life. Perhaps evidence of processes we haven't imagined. The trench has surprised us repeatedly in the past, and there's every reason to think it will continue to do so. The future of exploration is also the future of discovery, and the Mariana Trench remains one of the best places on Earth to find the genuinely new. There is a peculiar peace in contemplating the Mariana Trench, a quality of stillness that seems to emanate from the very idea of such depth. Perhaps it's the absence of light, the way darkness becomes not emptiness but presence, a tangible thing that wraps around you. Perhaps it's the pressure, the weight of water that slows all movement, turns every descent into a meditation on patience. Or perhaps it's simply the distance from the surface world, from storms and waves and the constant motion of the sunlit ocean. 7 miles down in Challenger Deep, the water is still, not motionless. Currents exist even there, slow rivers in the abyss, but still in a deeper sense. The violence of the surface, where wind tears at waves and storms churn the sea, doesn't reach these depths. The chaos of the shallows, where tides surge and predators chase prey, fades to quiet. The trench exists in a state of near equilibrium, conditions that change on geological timescales, not from hour to hour or day to day. For the explorers who have descended to Challenger Deep, the stillness is often the most striking feature. The absolute dark outside the submersible windows, the absence of sound except for the vessel's life support systems, the sense of being suspended in nothingness. It creates a state of sensory deprivation that can be profound. Some describe it as peaceful, almost meditative. Others find it unsettling, too quiet, too empty, too far from everything familiar. This stillness is part of what makes the trench different from other extreme environments. Antarctica is harsh, but not still. Wind howls across ice, storms batter exposed surfaces. Deserts are hot and dry but alive with the crackle of cooling rock at night, the skitter of insects, the occasional rain. The trench is quiet in a way few places on Earth can match, a quietness that comes from the absence of the sun's energy, the fading of biological activity to sparse and slow. The creatures that live in this stillness move slowly. The snailfish drift more than swim. Amphipods crawl methodically across the sediment. Even the bacteria in the mud divide at rates measured in decades or centuries. There's no hurry in the trench, no rush, no circadian rhythm of day and night to impose pace. Time passes differently when nothing marks its passage, when the environment is unchanging. For humans accustomed to the surface world's constant stimulation, the trench's stillness can be therapeutic. In an age of noise and distraction, of screens and notifications and endless information, the idea of a place utterly cut off from all that holds a certain appeal. 7 miles of water between you and the nearest cell tower, the deepest silence possible while still remaining on Earth. There's something almost enviable about it. But the stillness is not emptiness. The trench is not dead but alive, its life simply operating at a different pace, in a different mode. The slow feeding of amphipods, the patient decomposition by bacteria, the millennial accumulation of sediment, these are forms of activity. Processes as real and important as the frenetic motion of surface ecosystems. The trench teaches us that stillness and life are not opposites, that peaceful can also mean alive. This perspective can shift how we think about rest, about the value of quiet, about the need for spaces and times when we do less rather than more. The trench exists as a counterpoint to our culture of busyness, a reminder that much of Earth operates at slower paces. The urgency is often a choice rather than a necessity, that there is beauty and function in taking time. The stillness of the trench also invites contemplation of endings and beginnings. The deep ocean is where many things from the surface world end their journey, sediments settling out of the water column, dead organisms drifting down, nutrients reaching their final resting place. But it's also where new cycles begin, as bacteria break down the settled material, releasing nutrients that eventually return to the surface through upwelling currents, feeding new generations of life. This circular quality, this sense of the trench as both end and beginning, ties into larger thoughts about cycles and renewal, about how death feeds life, how the bottom of one system is the foundation of another. The stillness at the trench bottom is not static, but part of a larger motion, the slow turning of the ocean's conveyor belt, the patient circulation that connects all water, all depths, all parts of the sea. Sitting quietly and thinking about the Mariana Trench, about its stillness and depth, can be an act of meditation itself. You can picture the water above, pressing down, creating that immense pressure. You can imagine the darkness, perfect and complete. You can sense the cold, unchanging temperature. And in doing so, you can find a kind of mental stillness, a quieting of your own thoughts that mirrors the quietness of the deep. The trench offers us this gift, not just scientific knowledge but perspective, a reminder that Earth contains places of profound peace, that stillness exists, that depth is real and reachable. And in a world that often feels too shallow, too hurried, too loud, knowing such places exist can be a comfort, a touchstone, a reminder of other ways to be. The Mariana Trench is part of Earth, not separate from it. This seems obvious, yet it's easy to think of the trench as alien, as fundamentally other, so different from the world we know that it might as well be on another planet. But the trench is connected to everything else, to the surface ocean above it, to the atmosphere beyond that, to the land masses from which sediment and pollutants flow. Understanding the trench means understanding these connections, seeing how what happens in one part of the system affects all the others. The organic matter that feeds trench ecosystems starts as photosynthesis in surface waters. Plankton use sunlight to create sugars, which are eaten by small fish, which are eaten by larger fish, which eventually die and sink. This chain connects the brightest, warmest part of the ocean to the darkest, coldest. The trench doesn't exist in isolation, but as part of a vertical ecosystem that spans from sunlit waves to abyssal depths. Similarly, the pollution reaching the trench originates on land and in coastal waters. Plastic from cities washes into rivers, flows to the ocean, breaks into fragments, and eventually settles in the deep. The journey takes years or decades, but it happens, linking human behaviour thousands of miles away and thousands of feet above to the creatures crawling across Challenger Deep's floor. This interconnection means we can't separate our fate from the ocean's fate, or the trench's fate. If we pollute the surface ocean, we pollute the deep. If we overfish, we reduce the organic matter falling to the trench, affecting deep-sea ecosystems. If we alter the climate, changing ocean temperatures and chemistry, those changes will eventually reach even the most remote depths. The trench is downstream from everything, and what flows downstream tells a story about what happens upstream. But the connection works both ways. The deep ocean affects the surface too. Deep water circulation, driven by sinking of cold, dense water at the poles and slow upwelling in other regions, influences climate. The deep ocean absorbs vast amounts of carbon dioxide and heat from the atmosphere, moderating the pace of climate change. If the deep ocean circulation changes, if its capacity to absorb carbon diminishes, the effects would be felt globally in weather patterns, sea levels, and ecosystem health. The trench, as part of this system, matters even if most people never think about it. It's one piece of the machinery that keeps Earth habitable, that cycles nutrients and carbon, that regulates temperature and chemistry. Understanding it helps us understand the larger system, gives us tools to predict how that system will respond to changes we're imposing. There's also something profound about simply knowing the trench exists. It grounds us, reminds us that Earth is more than cities and farms, more than the landscapes we modify and control. The trench is utterly indifferent to human presence, operating according to laws of chemistry and biology and geology that predate us by eons. It will continue to exist long after our species is gone, still dark, still cold, still deep, still alive in its own strange way. This permanence is humbling but also comforting. We worry about our impact on the planet, about whether we're destroying something irreplaceable, and we are affecting Earth profoundly, changing its climate, its biology, its chemistry. But Earth has weathered extinctions before, mass dyings that wiped out most life on the planet, and it recovered, life evolved, new forms, ecosystems rebuilt. The trench, having existed through all of this, testifies to Earth's resilience, its ability to persist through catastrophes we can barely imagine. That doesn't excuse our actions or suggest we can be careless. The Earth that recovers from our impacts might not be one that includes us, might not be hospitable to human civilization. But it does suggest that the planet itself will endure, that life will find ways to continue, that places like the Mariana Trench will still be there, still mysterious, still offering lessons to whatever intelligent beings might someday explore them. Coming to understand the trench is, in a sense, coming home to Earth more fully. It's recognizing that our planet is deeper, stranger, more complex than we often acknowledge. It's embracing the parts of Earth that aren't easily understood, that resist our attempts to simplify or control, that remain wild in the truest sense. The trench is a gift to us, an opportunity to practice wonder, to exercise curiosity, to remember that we don't know everything, and that's beautiful. It's a reminder that exploration doesn't always require leaving Earth, that some of the most alien environments in the universe are right here, beneath our feet, beneath the ocean that covers most of our planet's surface. As we look to the future, as we contemplate human expansion into space, missions to Mars and beyond, we shouldn't forget what remains unknown here at home. The Mariana Trench, along with the rest of the deep ocean, deserves our attention, our resources, our care. It's part of the only home we have, the only planet we know supports life. Understanding it, protecting it, marvelling at it. These are ways of honouring Earth, of acknowledging that we belong to this planet and it has shaped everything we are. The trench teaches us about life's possibilities, about adaptation and resilience, about the balance between harsh conditions and the persistence of biology. It teaches us about our impacts, about how our choices ripple outward farther than we think. It teaches us humility, perspective, the value of mystery. And perhaps most importantly, it teaches us that Earth itself is enough. That we don't need to look elsewhere for wonder when such profound wonders exist in the deepest fold of our own world's ocean floor, waiting patiently in the dark, ready to teach us if we're willing to make the long descent and listen. Thank you for staying with me through this long journey, through these 2.5 hours we've spent together descending into the Mariana Trench and back again. It's no small thing to give your time and attention for so long, and I'm grateful you chose to spend this evening here, exploring Earth's deepest mystery together. We've travelled from the surface to Challenger Deep and back, 7 miles down through darkness and crushing pressure. We've seen the first historic dives, the decades of waiting, the return to exploration in the 21st century. We've met the creatures that call the trench home, giant amphipods, translucent snailfish, microbes beyond counting. We've contemplated the forces that created the trench and keep it restless, the pollution that has reached even this remote abyss, the mysteries that remain unsolved. The answer, as honestly as I can give it, the question of what's hidden in Earth's deepest place is this: more than we imagined, less than we'll eventually discover, and exactly what the planet needed to teach us about life, resilience, and our own place in the grand cycles that sustain this blue sphere. The trench holds secrets still, creatures we haven't met, processes we haven't observed, connections we haven't understood. But it's given us what we most need: perspective, humility, and a sense of wonder that reminds us why exploration matters. If you enjoyed this slow drift through the deep ocean, a like truly helps this reach others who might need the same peaceful way to end their day. Comments are welcome too. I love hearing where you're watching from, what surprised you, what questions the trench has left you with. And to those who've subscribed and journeyed with me before, thank you for returning. This community of curious, thoughtful people makes these long explorations worthwhile. Wherever you are in the world, I hope you're comfortable now. I hope your breathing has slowed to match the patient rhythms of the deep ocean. I hope your thoughts have settled like sediment drifting to the trench floor. I hope your body feels heavy and warm, ready for rest. The day is ending, and that's perfectly fine. Let it go. Imagine, if you will, looking down through 7 miles of water, down through all that darkness and all that pressure, all the way to the pale mud of Challenger Deep. Picture the stillness there, the cold, the quiet. All those amphipods moving slowly across the bottom, all those microbes in the sediment working at their patient pace, all that life existing at Earth's deepest point, thriving in conditions that seem impossible. Making a home where no home should be. It's all still there right now, at this very moment, as real as the bed you're lying in, as certain as the next breath you'll take. The trench continues, regardless of whether anyone is watching, holding its secrets, going about the slow work of being itself. There's a peace in that, I think. The world is larger than our awareness of it. Life persists in places we can't see, by mechanisms we barely understand, driven by forces older than our species. The Mariana Trench will be there tomorrow, and the day after, and 1,000 years from now, still deep, still dark, still quietly alive. And somehow, knowing that, accepting that there are such places, such permanence, such mystery we may never fully solve, that helps us sleep a little easier, reminds us that not everything needs our intervention. that some things simply are and will continue to be. Sleep well. Dream of deep water, if you dream at all. Dream of darkness that isn't frightening but peaceful, of pressure that supports rather than crushes, of cold that preserves. Dream of creatures moving slowly through an alien world that is nonetheless part of our own. Dream of the slow fall of particles through water, of the patient accumulation of sediment, of time measured not in hours but in millennia. Dream of the bottom of the world, where the ocean rests, where the weight of water presses everything into stillness and quiet. And when you wake, know that Earth still holds such places, that wonder still exists, that there are depths we've barely touched and heights we've hardly imagined, and that being alive on this planet means being part of something far larger and stranger and more beautiful than any single life can fully comprehend. Good night.